Okay, guys, we're going to get started. For those who don't know me, my name is Matt Tederick. I'm the Interim Town Manager. Wanted to thank Tina Presley, the Executive Assistant to the Town Manager, for putting all this together. And we have a lot of other folks to thank. Alfredo Gutierrez put together some of the boards. This is our third and last facilitation event. Frankly, I, for one, have thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed the amount of input that we received. The objective at the end of this process is to be able to have Chip Lickson, who's our facilitator, who's going to say a few words in a minute. He's going to provide a report assimilating the information from the last two meetings and this meeting tonight, and then we're going to have a work session with the town council, and I'm going to present them a draft policy and procedures for use of the gazebo area as well as Main Street closures, etc. So that's the process. There'll be time, there'll be additional time for you guys to have individual input to council members and whatnot. But as I said, throughout this process, it's been very productive. And Chips will correct me or he'll add to it if I fail to mention something. Tonight is not necessarily an input time. We had that the first two meetings. I do want to get some input from any new people, meaning people that did not attend the second meeting, because we went through a lot of questions at the second meeting. I'm going to review the answers that were the byproduct of the second meeting. And I know I have one error that we'll point out to you guys. But if you weren't able to attend the second meeting, I think George and Rick and you guys weren't there. So as you go through this process, if you see a question that you disagree with or you had new input, please let me know. Again, the purpose.
I'm turning my test now, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Right, man, that's good. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So with that, I will turn it over to Chips. He's going to set the ground rules, but I'm going to be walking through this today, and Bill Sealock, council member, is going to help me. Also wanted to welcome Mayor Gene Tewalt and his wife Juanita is here, and we've had other council members at the other first two meetings. It's been well attended. I think there's a lot of other events tonight, and that's why some others can't be here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chips, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Well, I would think that my work tonight will be minimal because we've accomplished so much in the last two meetings, facilitating meetings. So as the neutral facilitator, as I've said twice before, I don't have a vote on the outcome. I'll be interested because I'm a citizen of Front Royal, a resident of Front Royal. So it's all up to you. We find facilitated meetings work best with ground rules. And they're very simple. No interrupting and no attacking. And I will, with your permission, assume that I have your permission, I will enforce those ground rules. Since this is, I'm going to slightly modify what Matt said. Since this is not an opportunity for new input with regard to what are the possibilities for the public areas in the historic district, except those of you who have not had an opportunity to input your ideas. I think you will see that most issues, considerations were covered in one of the first two sessions. So my function tonight really will be minimal, but I consider myself more of a sergeant at arms, so to speak, to make sure the process flows evenly. I think it's fair to say that everyone is interested in what you see and what you hear. As an experienced facilitator, I have to commend you all and the public for one of the more democratic, if not the most democratic, process for formulating the procedures that will take place in terms of maybe potential change of regulations, the possibility of a change of ordinances, all of which is not our job. I'm really glad to see that my main man is here tonight, so I know that the evening can proceed well. At least I will have one positive vote when the evening is right, no interrupting, no attacking, except you're exempt from all that. So I assume there are no questions about process, and with that in mind, I will turn it back over to Matt and Bill to go over what we've already talked about and the output. Okay.
Okay, so the first discussion point at the last meeting was to establish a criteria by which the town manager should evaluate an event. And you'll see in the first section, measurable criteria that the town would use to choose the best event if there were many applications to choose from. And the consensus of the group was to, in this order, was attendance, revenue, equitable distribution of vendors, and what that meant was that the vendors were spread throughout the closed area in the event Main Street were closed, qualitative feedback, cost to the town, and the history of the event. So I really think the top 2 or 3 were probably the major votes at the last meeting. Did any new individuals, Rick or George, or you guys, did you have any new input to that? Do you have another criteria that we missed, or?
I don't take issue with it.
Pretty good. Okay, the second, or the next point, should the town pay for all, part, or none of the police and other services? The majority of the group said that the town should pay 50% of the police and other services. Applicants should pay 50%. That was of the group. That was the majority of the group by far. Just so you know, if you look at the questions, it was 0 to 100%. Applicant pays 100%. Town pays 25. Applicant pays 75. 50-50. 75 police and support. 25% applicant, or 100%. Town pays 100%. Any new members have any different? Nothing major there. Good. The next question is, should event proposals require a proposed budget and budget breakdown, as well as follow-up financials? This was probably one of the strongest questions, nearly unanimous. That was a yes. So there's some great input for me as far as future applications. New people, any disagreement with that? How long should Main Street and other facilities be closed for an event? And, we got the fewest number of votes for this in general, but actually, no, I'm sorry, that was an overwhelming, apologize, all day. So they were okay with closing, whether it be Main Street or gazebo, all day, provided, and I think this was an underlying point, and Chips and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, the underlying point is, provided the criterias were established. So they had no issues with closing events, or closing the streets, or other facilities all day. Did you guys understand that?
Yeah, my only comment would be, and even answering the question without that information is, as long as there's something going on, but just the street, we have the thing blocked off all day. We finished 3 hours ago, but we're still allowed to have it blocked off. That's not acceptable. Or 3 hours before. Whatever it takes to set up and break down, but then no more.
That's good.
But as much as all day, I'm cool with that.
Good point. George? Any input on, any additional input in the back? Okay.
Can I just ask that for clarification, just so I can understand, because I'm going to help write the report. You're okay with the concept of the Main Street being closed, but if the event is over and it's over with several hours still to go in the business day, there's no point in keeping Main Street closed. Is that?
No, what if it's a flop?
Or, yeah, no, I mean, but is that your point?
So let's close, let's some people are gonna come to Main Street and not have any idea that there's a festival that day.
Yes.
And then they'll know what to do if there is or there isn't. So hopefully it doesn't happen to anybody who's planning one, but sometimes, I've seen where there was hardly anybody on the street and the street was blocked off, not for anything that's currently going on. There may have been some others that, people tried, so.
Excuse me, are you suggesting that become an element that the town manager considers and should be part of a policy? And I don't know quite how you put that in writing, but maybe it's just a very good suggestion.
You might have a festival that I only want to run my festival for half the day. I only want to do it from 10 to 3, whatever. So all day is a really broad kind of stroke.
I think
I'm okay with it, but let's not overclose.
Yeah.
If there's
No,
nothing going on.
I'm hearing you. I just don't know how we're going to put it in writing. Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
But,
I hear that. I
okay.
think we got to process it.
Yeah, I think part of that too is like if I'm setting up an event and I only need it blocked off for that time, I can just say I need it blocked off for that time.
Yeah, the application should have.
But that's part of the
time period on it.
application, how long. But if I want it for the day, I should be able to close it off for the day, as long as I meet the criteria.
I'll cite an example for you free, but when we have Taste of the Town, they actually close the street at 4 o'clock, and then we're over by 9.
Right.
And that's the way that was.
Right.
So,
Because it'd still take time to set up and tear down
yeah,
for the vendors and all that.
right.
Good. Good.
The way I captured that was, if there's no activity on Main Street, then the street should be open. Is that fair enough?
Thanks, fair. Sure. Okay, good. The next question is, how long should the Village Commons parking lot and other facilities be closed for an event? Again, overwhelming majority, no restrictions, provided it's meeting the criteria that's been predetermined. Okay. When should the town consider applications for events? Overwhelmingly, any time throughout the year. Anyone have an issue with that? Should an event that occurred the previous year receive any preferential treatment in determining if the same event should be approved in subsequent years? And overwhelming, that was a yes. So I did have one thought personally about that question, and I wanted to relay it to the group. Chip, I think I can just open up the whole group if I post it.
Please.
Yeah. So I think a qualifier that needs to be noted in all this, and I'm certain that council is going to want the town manager to have this kind of discretion. Let's assume for a moment that there's a once in a decade event that this the Tour de Virginia bike tour is coming through Front Royal, and it happens to be on a day of an event. I think in a case like that, I think it's important that we don't set some preconceived notion that everyone's guaranteed a day of the event because you did it the previous year on that date. I think it was a once in a lifetime or once in a decade time, something very important that the town gets notified of well in advance. Of course, if I were the town manager, I'm sure any town manager, any council member would relay that out as quickly as we got the notice. But I thought it'd be important to clarify that point. Any issues with that? It makes sense, doesn't it?
So long as you're not bumping an event at the last second, like, oh,
Yeah.
well, this once in a lifetime event's coming on. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Like the week
especially
before,
after
oh, we're
they've
bumping.
3 months of planning and spend
Yeah.
money and right, I get it. Yeah.
Excuse me, maybe there should be some kind of timeline or advance notice or something like that, because presumably the town manager would get notice. We're coming through Front Royal with the National Bike Race or something like that. They'd have to plan too where they're going to be, and did you?
Your bigger events are gonna plan 6 months, 8 months out, so we're gonna fill out applications 6 or 8 months out in advance anyway. It's not like we're just gonna come in and say, you know what, next week we wanna shut Main Street down. Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
On the grandfathering of events, I think what we talked about last time is as long as they continue to meet that criteria.
Correct.
So
Yep.
if they have, you know, if the event got much smaller that year and they
Yeah.
only have a couple hundred people, then they would not be considered,
Yeah,
even though they've been there before.
you're correct.
Then you know whether.
Okay, next question. Should an applicant be limited in terms of the number of events they can have in a given year? And majority said unlimited number of events per organization. And again, I think it goes back to provided that they're meeting the criteria that's been predetermined and established. Any input, new input? Should the town limit the total number of events held on Main Street? We made a mistake on this one. So if you go to your page, if you're following along, our apology, we made a mistake. The answer for that one is twice a month. So if you notice on my board, I scratched it out. So be sure to scratch it out on your paper. I apologize. We just didn't want to. We just caught it late. We didn't want to reprint. And
It's item E on your list.
item E. So it's 11.
11.
If you're new, it's on item E. Sorry.
I don't have.
Oh,
Item
it's
11.
Go into closures.
11.
Oh, you don't have
Number
it.
2, closure's number 2.
Have the agenda. We don't have it.
Second bullet point under
Oh, the questions.
closure,
I'm
number
in your
2.
Where's the question?
Right there.
Second bullet point under.
Oh, right.
Underneath closures, the second one.
Closure, bullet point number 2.
Okay, yeah, I do have that when they were talking about item here.
So just scratch out.
Yeah, he said item.
We got it now.
Is it, so right here, town shall submit full
Correct.
closure.
No, limit would be 2. It'd be
2
Main
times
Street
per
right
month.
here. It's the second one, 2 times a month.
Yes, item
So
11.
on my sheet, I voted 1 per month.
Okay, so you did one. All right.
So I would object to
Okay.
that. But
Let's see. You would have been the only person to vote 1 a month.
really? It's all right.
But that's okay. That's good input. I'll take it. Okay, next question. Should the town permit the full closure of the village commons, including the parking lot? That also was 2 times a month. Should the town permit the partial closure of the village commons, including parking lot? That was no limit. So the partial closure is no limit. Now, where we had a fair amount of discussion had to deal with the criteria of closing Main Street. There was a fair amount of criteria or discussion on that. It seemed like the magic number was 5,000 to close Main Street. And that was some individuals asked the chief his opinion. He thought 5,000 was the right number. We added, this was down here if you notice in your sheet, that's just general discussion that went on. But 5,000 seemed to be the magic number for Main Street. Now whether, I don't know exactly how we measure that per se. That's something we have to discuss internally. As it relates to closure of the parking lot, there was discussion about 750 to 1,500 for an event to full closure of the gazebo parking lot, and 750 was, if the intent is 750, the parking lot in Main Street should remain open. Rick?
Even though I wasn't here, I did watch, thank you for your video, national media, I watched the meeting, and it sounded like there was some discussion about that the Village Commons gazebo area was kind of used as a festival incubator, if you will, in some cases, to demonstrate success rather than, say somebody came in with a new festival and said, hey, it's going to be gigantic, it's going to be huge, and we need every street in town, just to exaggerate. And so it's going to be up to the town manager to sort of vet that, and, in some cases if it's new, but I would encourage that we use an incubator sort of process for festivals before, we do full closures of the streets.
That's good.
So, excuse me, what I'm hearing is you're making a suggestion.
I think I even heard at the other meeting, you know, or the impracticality, maybe, which is, didn't you say yours is that way?
Yes, what we said at the first meeting was we are limited to this for the first time we do it, and then we kind of grow out from there. So
Yeah,
it's an
the
incubator, so
idea.
yes, he is absolutely
That's an
correct.
excellent idea. Are you proposing something that needs to be added to the criteria? Or is it covered? That's my question. You ought to think about that. I don't think you are.
I think it's
It's implied in the numbers.
In the numbers,
Yeah.
right.
It's implied in the
I
numbers.
think so.
Okay, and I have, even though I don't have a vote, I don't know of any rule which says I can't comment. And I have a question, and that is, it's a general question. It's really addressed to the town manager and ultimately to the town council. How does any organization or any sponsoring entity determine in advance what Nikki is fortunate because we've had a number of festivals and nice to see you, Nikki. I'm glad you're feeling better. And she knows what to estimate, what number to estimate. But both of other organizations, I think, have to make an educated guess and convince the town manager that it's based upon some kind of reality. And you're right, he'll
Say I'm gonna have
to-
50,000 people
Yeah, exactly.
on my application.
Yeah.
You've been through it, Will. I mean, how did you do it?
I built it. First year we did it as a thank you, and people asked us for more. That's what this comes from right here that people don't understand. It wasn't me coming to town to decide I want to shut the streets and bring a festival to town. It was the community coming in the ice cream shop and asking me, hey, can we do that crawfish boil again? Yeah. Can we do this again? So it was me listening to them and then going and asking people to participate. And participate. So some of these numbers and attendance, I mean, there's no guarantee. As we've stated,
It rains.
It rains, and I don't have 5,000 people here. I'm not going to get the chance to do it again. It's not necessarily fair, but I think it's an idea that we can all come together with up in the proposed items. I don't want vendors' tents down the main street. I've never wanted vendor tents down Main Street. I've always wanted to keep vendors there, but to keep Main Street closed so you put the cars down Main Street and have every business owner come outside of their store on the sidewalk. When you're staring over a car, you're looking at their shop. You see their people. That's what we want. Everybody coming together to have a good time. So the incubator, using that, building up, it's year after year, you add on to it and you add on to it. That's how we grow.
I think we also talked about there being a metric, so there's a follow-up afterwards, and if we said there's going to be 5,000 people and there are only 500 people, that's going to be a mark against you for the following year. So there's some accountability of the festival organizers.
Yep.
And it could mean that you lose your spot to do it next year.
Yep. So internally, just so all of you know, what I'm trying to build towards before I exit out in this temporary role is establishing more of an SOP for these kind of events and events. I meet with staff ahead of time and we have a process for reviewing the application. The event takes place and we have a process for ensuring a good, safe event, as well as a clean event, and electric's provided, and water's provided, etc. And then after the event, we have an after action internally and maybe with the organizer, and we document that, and we keep it in the folder for the next year. We come out and go, okay, well, the after action that last year, this is what the after action report said last year. And we go through that process. You know, the objective is, and I really want to reiterate this from a personal perspective in conversations I've had with each individual council member, the objective is a lot of vibrant events. You know, it's not about stopping events. It's about having good, successful, vibrant events. And how can the town provide the infrastructure and the opportunity for nonprofit organizations to have these type of events. I had a couple citizens approach me with some ideas. We're pretty much finished with this. I want to just throw out a couple points.
Can I
Oh,
make
please.
one point about the incubator
Sure.
discussion? Well, I think that could be a good approach for many types of festivals. I don't want it to be rigid, so I would like to keep it open so that if you can show that other towns have done such events and they draw 20,000 people, and you're going to advertise it across a huge area,
sure.
that you could do it right
Sure.
away on Main Street and shut it down.
I think there's a lot of wisdom around it. We had one citizen approach me about possibly if Main Street is closed for an event, and typically it's been my recollection that there's not a lot of, Nick, you made your event maybe, but there's not a lot of events that truly go from Royal Avenue all the way to, say, Blue Ridge with vendors on both sides of the road.
We only go one side of the road, so you can get emergency vehicles
Exactly.
down there.
And I think what would be good to do is switch the sides of the road every other year. Okay, so I think that's a good process to keep in place. I think
And they don't, it doesn't go all the way to Royal, it goes to, y'all have to tell me the name of that street.
Second Street probably.
No,
Or Crescent?
it's the street that's right there by Town Hall, that little cutoff. That's where the balances are.
Yeah, you're right. So they
Okay.
can come in behind that.
So there's that piece in front of the courthouse that is still open. So no festival goes truly past that point.
Well, we have our ticket booth there, so you've got lines that go all the way up to the traffic light, so that's why we don't go beyond
Good.
that point, just because you've got people standing in line to get in.
Good, yeah, good.
Matt, one, if I may, what FREBA has done in the past is when we're ready for the event, for our own edification as well, we have a very short meeting with the town and just to make sure that trash cans are there, electric's on. It doesn't, and it's usually one of our people. We'll meet with them, and it's just a checklist, and that's all it is.
Yeah, perfect.
So that doesn't take minutes.
Perfect. A second comment was vendors. Is there a way to ensure the sidewalks remain open and that the vendors don't put merchandise on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalks behind the vendors?
We put that in all of our communications to the vendors on the application and everything.
So you think that'd be a wise thing to put in the
Absolutely.
town's application?
Absolutely.
Most certainly, because you don't want the sidewalks
Yeah.
blocked, and
Okay.
you don't want them to be hampered. And that is pretty much
Safety.
nationwide safety for all
Yeah,
events
I got it.
that everybody does.
New,
Some vendors do, and some
concept.
vendors don't. It's really incumbent on the organizer
To enforce it.
Enforce it,
Yeah.
I mean, backed up by the town police
But,
enforcement.
don't make light of what, I think part of the application process, and maybe I don't think it's in there right now, the permit application process. It's probably by Nikki's organization, maybe yours or whatever, is a commitment by the participant who is going to have an event or vendor or whatever. I think it should be part of the application.
Well, if you're hosting an event like this, then you should be on the street, talking to your vendors, moving around, making sure that the people and the things are running smoothly, because you got thousands of people, mechanicals running all over the place, yeah. So as they're setting up, they get their application, they know what they have to do, what they can't do. If you see that somebody steps out of line and has a bunch of stuff on the sidewalk, then it's your responsibility or somebody within your organization to go say, you can't clear the sidewalks. Yeah. And that's what it should be. So yeah, that falls on the promoter of the event.
Okay, I have another question, and maybe you guys can help me. For a ticketed event, so I'm thinking of the Wine and Craft Festival, or something that you have to buy a ticket to get into.
You don't only have to buy a ticket to get in if you're going to drink wine.
You only get a wine glass ticket.
That's right.
Correct.
Basically, right.
So you can
Yep.
walk the wine and craft for free.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I just want to make sure we're all good. I think something like that that's not, to my knowledge, that's not specifically stipulated in the application, that a ticketed event must be just for an item as opposed to access to the event. The event's open to the public because we have an open Main Street and we have merchants on Main Street. So those were three comments that I had received for tonight. And Chip said we have a small enough group. I think it'd be worthwhile just to maybe go around the table and get any last input before you compile a report, return it to me, and then I send it to the town council. So is there anything that we've missed? Anything you guys? Yes,
I
ma'am.
have one question on the partial closing of the gazebo. And it says it's at any time. People can do it at any time, correct? Do you have a limit on the people? Or
Yes, ma'am.
Is that in?
Well, what was proposed, this is nothing set in stone yet, is that if it's less than 750 people,
For partial
for
closing.
partial closure, it stays open.
Again, it's your best, the sponsor's best estimate of.
But who's going to
Because,
monitor that?
well,
Yeah.
can I just finish that one sentence? Because now it does have financial overtones in the application, because a sponsor who is having an event, if they estimate 2,000 people are going to come, the police and Department of Public Works and so forth will estimate what they need. And I want to ask the chief, first of all, thanks for being here. It is very helpful to have you right here, part of the process. And the answer is probably they sometimes do not. Your officers who are at the event, are they being paid regular salary or are they on overtime?
Typically, they're on overtime if it's a bigger event where we've got, sometimes if it's a very small event, we just keep an eye on it with the existing shift. But, wine and craft, particularly anything that serves alcohol, we're certainly going to have more cops on scene for that type of thing. Parades, clearly, we have to call in people beyond what is actually on shift.
So
the bigger events.
The event sponsor of, let's say, a parade or something like that, unless it's a town-sponsored event, like the Christmas parade, it would be clear that they would be financially responsible for a portion of the actual expenses. I want clarity on that, on the part of you all, because they'll need it.
That doesn't come from my office. That would be a decision that would be made by council and through the town managers.
Okay. Ralph, you had a question for us?
Yeah, I did. I said, who's going to monitor?
Monitor
how many people?
Yeah, so
Because I've
that's,
seen it where they have them and they close it down all day and they have 100 people.
right. Yeah, to me, that's, in
I
this
know you
whole,
got it figured into 750,
yeah.
but who's going to tell them?
Is that going to help with the,
I think
maybe
that's
the
Rick's point.
feedback? Is that going to come later with the feedback?
Yes.
Or-
For me, I think the most challenging aspect.
Kyle's going to show up and say, fail,
Yeah.
open that parking lot.
Yeah, so I think the most challenging.
If I've got personnel out there and I don't need them, I'm gonna send them home.
Right.
That's impacting my budget. And clearly, if it's an event where there's, was alleged to be more than 750 people there and there's clearly 200, we're probably gonna have a discussion at that point with the organizer and say, you can maintain this within the gazebo area, we're gonna go ahead and open the parking lot back up.
Right.
Especially if there's not vendors and things like that. I mean,
Right.
if you've got vendors, even if you don't have the number of people, and you've got vendors that are paid to be there, and they've got parking spaces where it's clearly not feasible to open the lot, in my estimation, we would give them their allotted time.
I think that's a good point, Tina. Can you please make note of that? Because I think that's important. The town manager or his designee has the ability to modify locations and whatnot based upon turnout. If it's a mad storm and we have 10 vendors on Main Street, maybe we can move them on a piece of Chester and keep Main Street open. Yes, ma'am.
That's probably someone you need to check in with, because the organizer could tell you one thing, and the police said there's only 100 people there, we sent people home, so then you know
Yeah,
it's a measurement of how they did.
that's good.
It all goes back to your point. It needs a certain amount of flexibility and judgment. It's a judgment call.
Well, I mean, the big thing is to get it, if it isn't already, in the application and put the
But-
put the applicant on notice.
Yes.
And there are guidelines, you know, there's cause and effect depending on, you know, you can tell us you're gonna have 1,000, but if you only have 200,
I think that's.
we
gonna be
reserve
part
the
of-
right to, you
That's
know.
gonna be part of the report to the council, that is, because this whole purpose of these 3 meetings is to prepare a decent report. And the output of the report is going to be council deciding what should the application permitting process be, and what does it say?
I mean, alternating the street, Nikki, is that in writing anywhere, or is that just an understanding from one of these we did 3 or 4 years ago? You know?
Well, for us, it was an understanding with the police,
But I'm just saying,
and
every
fire
time, you
rescue.
know, every time you get a new town manager.
Yeah, it's
they
not,
may
yeah, it's not on anything that we fill out or anything of
Yeah,
that
see,
nature
that's
now.
so, it needs to survive
Exactly. I'm
this
trying to
meeting, so we don't have any
institutionalize
more
this,
of
you
these.
know? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So for me, I take out of all these responses, which were good responses, great responses, the one that I have found the greatest challenge is if in fact Chip recommends or I recommend to council setting a number of attendees as a criteria, how do we measure that? How do we if the event organizer says, oh yes, I'm gonna have 6,000 people at this event, how do I know that he had 3,000? So if you don't have an answer now, email me. Well, but I mean, am I gonna, you know, I got 1,
Yeah, but
2,
even for us who
wait a minute, that's 8, 9
even for
a.m.
us who are there all day long, I mean, I can tell you how many tasting tickets are sold.
Yeah, ticket
But,
sales.
yeah, I can't tell you though, especially when you're talking about an open street and people who are coming down just to look at the vendors, who are coming down to listen to the music, there's no real way to accurately say, you know, and this.
And I know maybe I'm overemphasizing the point, but I think this process has made a very important decision. I mean, you can make a decision, it's actually the council ultimately that's going to make the decision. And that is, it's money, it's a money issue, it becomes a money issue. So if you're estimating 500 people, then you probably, it's not going to cost anything more because they've already got power, it's $25 for power, whatever. But if it's 5,000 people, it's got to be planned for. So I think if you are billed for half of whatever 5,000 people would ultimately cost at 50% of 5,000, you're going to have feedback, I think, from the sponsors if only 2,000 show up. So I think that you all have accomplished a very major undertaking with that decision.
It's an inexact science, but I mean, maybe you take an average of what the festival organizer says they had and what the police report, and I don't know.
You guys count?
Except that the application is still down.
Who knows?
Well,
How many people
look,
vote?
now you will. Now that's part of the.
Yeah, we gotta do a census.
Yeah, well, the
Just have Randolph make tickets, throw it, just slide over the top.
Okay.
You're saying in the back?
I was gonna say, when you initially start events, you don't know how many people's gonna show up, so just like you said, like that incubator, whatever, like starting at the gazebo area and expanding makes sense. But you don't know when you're starting an event, how many you're gonna have show up. So, I mean, so I mean, you're crazy if you start an event, you're estimating, well, I'm gonna have 5,000, but this is your first event. You know, I just think that's ridiculous, you know.
I think it's a really good point.
Be stretching it, you know, with your first event.
That's a really good point.
So back to the numbers on closing the full gazebo. As we know, we host the cruise-ins, the car shows. So you have 59 parking spots in the gazebo area. So we fill that up with antique cars. Well, we don't want the trolley driving through there. These cars are irreplaceable. Some of them we would never replace them. Or the public to be driving through. You're not gonna reach 750 people guaranteed at every one of those events, but you're probably going to reach 250 to 300. So there's got to be some type of leeway there that I'm all about taking 750 people together. Let's get 750 people together and take us down to the gazebo area and spread us out and see what 750 people actually look like at the gazebo area. Take a screenshot, take a drone footage.
We all got a scoop of ice cream, right?
I'll give every one of them a scoop of ice cream.
Well, and to your point, I think you may have really helped with the discussion point in that, because if in fact the criteria is 750 or less, it shouldn't be closed, then maybe the example of the car show, instead of it being as frequently, maybe it's only every other month, and we see if the numbers build up because of that. Or maybe that's not the right event to close it.
Well, with the car show, we're only there, what, 3 hours?
That's
It's
right.
usually, what, like 5 p.m. to 8?
5 to 8, 5 to 9.
So, I mean, it's in a short period of time, so
Maybe-
it's not like
maybe
an
that's-
all-day event.
Maybe that's acceptable. Yeah, right.
And that's,
Yeah, sorry.
There are ways to look at that, and you can use drone footage or whatever, and you section the areas off, figure out how many people, what it looks like when it's, 10 people in this section, half of that section, and you can have a pretty, that's how they do crowds, except for some presidents, but that's how they do it. That's how they do the counting of crowds. They say they just do a whole, and they just make it in little sections.
Grid it,
They said,
grid
yep,
it, yeah.
and then they say this is how many
Yeah.
people are in those
Yeah.
sections.
Yeah, we may get there. I mean, right, I think, instinctively, I think it's just gonna be a swag for the first year until we can start more precisely developing that measurement.
Realistically, I think you could potentially maybe do something, because Nikki, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the River and Brews Festival is a ticketed event. Yes,
It is.
everybody that goes into that space.
No,
they can come in
you
if they
can come in
wanna.
for free.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's not, yeah. Well, again, that's an area that's typically, it's a bit more, there's more of a conglomeration there.
Sure, oh,
To
yeah.
Where you could maybe utilize some drone footage and get an idea of, okay, there's a 50 by 50
Okay.
square foot area. There looks to be 30 people in that space. Multiply that out by
Right,
whatever
multiply it by
space you got,
the
do all the math. Somebody else can do the math. I mean, math's hard.
On the other
I'm
hand,
there to do the math.
Nikki and Willie and presume all sponsors who've done events in the past would have a pretty good idea of what the input, that is the people.
And I think we've established that, and that's what we've used to determine what kind of some of these baseline numbers are for closing down, making the move to close down Main Street, partial closure, full closure of gazebo. I think some of that's been kind of done.
Good. Good input. Anything else from this side? Yes, sir.
So going off those numbers, obviously, are those gonna be more than likely set in stone, those 3 numbers that are on there?
So,
Because I've attended events before where that number has quickly, because of how close they are, it's quickly gone over that, because this is what, 1,500 is they're showing for a complete closure?
yeah.
So, someone writes down 900 and it quickly swells over that. I guess my question is, there's definitely got to be people in place to be monitoring that, so that, because then it's going to become a safety issue.
Sure.
The number swells up. Well, now we've got to look at closing Main Street.
Yeah,
So is
the town
that
manager, the chief will be on the phone.
so?
And
There's
he
going to be a
says,
presence at those events.
boss, we have a
going,
safety issue.
We've
I
gotta
think we
close
can
that
close
stuff down.
Blue Ridge to Chester. I say, roger that, make it happen. So that's how, yeah, absolutely, good point.
Well, and having more people than you projected is every organizer's dream.
Yeah.
Green.
Yeah.
It usually works, unfortunately, in the other direction.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great.
Usually rains on our parade.
Any other input, Tim, or, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I just have one small point on the 50-50 split of costs. Ideally, that would happen in advance. So in other words, the organizer would know that the police thing is going to cost $2,000, and you kind of agree to that, despite what it actually is at the end, so that you can plan for a cost item. See what I'm saying?
I would envision if that's determined to be used in the process and the application fee, I would imagine sitting down and figuring it out, in other words, based upon, if you look at the second sheet, it's there's not a lot of difference between, we pretty much, it was pretty consistent as far as a parade is going to cost generally X.
Right.
Closing Main Street is going to cost generally Y, and closing, so you weren't really far off.
Yeah.
So I think we could come up with that model, that formula, and say, okay, the application fee is this. And let's say it rained that day, and the chief didn't need five officers, only needed 2. I think we credited them back. Money that wasn't used, and again, the objective is not for the town to make money. Right. It's not. That's not the objective in all this.
I think the organizer will need some budget to work with.
I think so. I think that's fair, reasonable, personally. Right.
So is there in the application, is there maybe a page that would say, festivals that require electricity and trash and police that are of this size?
Yeah.
Typically, you should plan for this amount of expense, and this amount of expense,
Yeah,
and
that's
this amount of expense. So a festival organizer knows what they're getting into too, right? Because they don't want to get the bill at the end and go, wow, right? I had no idea it was going to cost
Some of the larger
$30,000.
communities do actually do that.
Right. I mean, I want to know.
Yeah.
Because I would build that into my financials to begin with.
Our portable toilets also figured into larger events as well, and is that required of the organizer?
That is required of the
Okay.
organizer of the event to
Okay.
cover the porta potties
And that's based
that
upon-
are there.
that's based
And that's
upon
based
health
on
department.
attendance in the health department, yeah.
And
They
a ratio.
decide how many?
Yes,
Like if I say
they-
I'm having 2,000 people, they're going to tell me how many
Then
toilets
the
I have?
health department will tell you how many porta potties you have to have for that many people, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, on this car show event, he was talking about safety and all. And I don't know if the car show event probably hits the 750 mark for closure. But you got to remember also with the car show, I don't know if y'all have been to the car shows or something when they have the cruise-ins or not. But that's all right there. Usually the cars come in, they park, and then you got people in and out of the cars. And they're not usually paying attention what's coming through. The closure, I think, is a very good thing for the safety part of it, because number one, it keeps somebody from running over somebody because they're taking pictures of some car they owned years back and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. They walk out in front of somebody or something like that. But you got to remember, all the people are going to be confined to that area looking at the cars.
Yeah. Processing this, in other words, if I were to process that, I don't disagree. I think if you're going to have something like like the car show that have these, very expensive antique cars, you want to preserve them, yeah, maybe you would, I would think, want to close off certain areas so that they're protected.
Right.
But it gets back to the underlying criteria. So for me, if this is the criteria, attendance, revenue, and equal distribution of vendors, there's no vendors at a car show, so then the criteria would be revenue, where there's no revenue, so then it would be attendance. So if attendance is a criteria, I would try to get a feel for, okay, if there's 60, how many slots?
59.
59 slots, so I know there's going to be 59 people, because they're at least one person. So if they have husband and wife, half of them, whatever, so we have a number. So let's say it's 100. How many visitors are we expecting that day to come look at the car show? And if it's 50 or 100 people, the question would have to be discussed with the applicant. Why are we closing this space for a car show when people may want to park there for restaurants and shopping? But in your case, it's evening. I mean, I get all that. But those are the kind of discussions I think the town manager needs to have with the applicant to try to walk through and figure out, is this the best location for your car show, considering the attendance from the last car show you had. And the last car show you had 100 people. Well, should we be closing the gazebo for 100 people? Well, the town manager, I'm sure, has the discretion to alter the criteria based upon some kind of factor in discussion with the applicant. So I don't know. I mean, I think part of it's got to be judgment in some of this. Make sense? I mean,
Yeah, but it will be some revenue, because I mean, when me and the wife go, that's automatic, what, 40, 50 bucks that we spend for dinner that night,
Exactly.
that we wouldn't have spent on Main Street, because I'll be honest with you, we just don't go to Main Street. It's a draw to us to go to Main Street.
Yeah, I get it.
Rick, did you?
Is the length of the event a possible criteria that should be added? Like a 3-hour car show from 5 to 8 or whatever? It's a different
that's
sort
what I'm
of
saying.
ask
That's what I'm saying.
than a car show that's gonna last from 7 in the morning
That's
till
interesting.
9 at night.
That's an interesting point. So in other words, attendance, so the attendance here that was discussed last time seems more like an all-day event attendance.
So we have all sorts of different things.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
We
You
got
said
it.
at the first meeting, we have weddings going on down
That's right. And that's not 750 people,
Uh-uh.
but we may want to close the gazebo for a wedding, you know,
there. Well,
for a couple
if I
hours.
requested for my
Duration,
celebration.
sir.
I don't want some of my Main Street friends down there.
That's what I was trying to ask.
Can't hear you.
No, like I say, it was just all about the time constraint, and that's what I was trying to ask earlier about the car show. Like, we're there from, 5 to 8 or whatever. We're not going to generate 750 people.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point.
It's just a short.
That helps, that kind of input helps a lot. Can't think of it all. Anything else we miss? Lori Cockrell, member of council, thank you. Anything else?
So we gotta understand that when somebody comes in and does, again, I didn't anticipate growing into an event on a yearly basis, but it's just kind of what happened. For those to continue to grow, then the community needs to buy in. So the community needs to buy in. Chamber can't put on the Wine and Craft Fest without sponsors.
Yeah.
Without, because who's gonna pay that money out of pocket? I'd pay that money out of pocket 1 year. I've paid that money out of pocket 3 years. But you can't continue to pay that money out of pocket without having people buy in too. That's where your attendance comes into play. That's where your community growth comes into play. These events that we have here should be community oriented and thought first and foremost about the communities in which we live.
I think the town has a role, 1 second, please. I think the town has a role in that as well.
Of course.
The town government, right? And I think the chamber and the partners around the big organizations around the town government, I think we all, if there's an event planned, we should all help and promote it. And yes, I'm sorry.
And this is, I don't have any problem paying this figure, 50% of this figure, but my problem is, this is my problem. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, because every other event is sponsored by the town. So does that mean that that fee is waived because the town is sponsoring the event? So the only figure that this is hitting is us, and that's it.
Yeah, I think in that case.
Okay, that would be my only issue. So if you're saying that the town's gonna pay 50% and the applicant's gonna pay 50%, but if there's some caveat in there, but if the event is co-sponsored by the town, then they don't have to pay it, then the only person that this is affecting is C&C Family Fun Day,
No,
and that's
that's
it.
not true, because our 2 events are not co-sponsored by the town. So this directly affects us. All of our events, none of our events are co-sponsored by the town.
Yeah, I don't know that the town co-sponsors any event. The
None
town
of
may
ours.
have an
National
event.
Night Out.
What's that?
National Night Out.
Well, it's our event though.
Yes, that's I think.
And
to my
Hell-
knowledge,
and-
that's the
and
only
Halloween.
That the town sponsors is
But
National
Halloween,
Night Out.
the Halloween.
And the Halloween, the Halloween.
So I mean, we pay 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if the town is a co-sponsor, you're right, there has to be an adjustment of the cost, but.
But we don't co-sponsor to my knowledge. I don't think
Me
we ever.
either. I don't-
We're paying 100%.
Well, the taxpayers are paying.
Right,
this.
yeah.
So they're, have to.
Behind Rick,
for them.
yes ma'am. Did you have your hand up? Okay, all right.
To the point though about, costs and fees, somebody I know who does events is asking for uniform treatment of all applicants. That maybe some fees get waived for this one and some for that one.
that's a formula for chaos.
Well, I'm just, yeah, no, it is, no,
It's
it
me.
is, but anyway, uniform treatment for all applicants.
That's a matter of record now.
Fairness, you know.
Yeah, and again, so I'm not, I want to reiterate, I really value the input, but that's how I'm looking at this. And Chip's going to pull together the report, and he's going to give it to me, and it's going to be input. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the input and determine what I think to be a reasonable policy that meets the consensus of the input I've received, as well as the council's objectives and other citizens' objectives. Right? So, as an example, the group is saying, perhaps 50-50 is the right formula. Well, that may not be the right formula this year, right? Maybe something that we have to let organizers know that this is what we're going to get into next year. There's several. I've held applications to go through this process, and I'm not suggesting it's fair to people like Willie, who's got an event in May, and Nikki, who's got an event in May. They say, hey, by the way, guess what? It's February now. You got to pay. So I think there's going to be. I appreciate the input. And that's what I've gotten good input, but there's going to be that discretion that I have to be able to exercise.
Excuse me. And remember, this is a public process, so this is only part of the public process. You've had input, which will show up in hopefully my report, which will be gone over with people. And then a report will be presented to the town council, and that's another opportunity. If there is a strong feeling, it's time to make feelings known to the town council. And this was a very constructive, this is almost the end, and maybe
wrap it up,
yeah. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I just want a clarification. So you're saying that the town does not sponsor the Festival of Leaves event?
Correct.
The town does not?
Heritage Society. Warren Heritage
So
Society.
Warren Heritage Society pays for insurance for their parade. It's not town insurance on that festival. I just want a clarification on that.
They have their own insurance.
Yeah, they have their own insurance.
Okay. So, again, this is sort of the wrap-up portion. And it doesn't mean you can't say something if you have something to say. This is phase one, if you will. Phase one of the process, which will result in a recommendation to the town council. And the recommendation to the town council will come from the acting town manager, who will comply or apply all of your input, some of which has already been prioritized. I know you, and I think you all know that you have good hearing, plus we have a record, don't we? A video record of all three of these meetings. So does anybody have anything they want to say to complete the evening, and I would say to complete the process for themselves? Again, may I say, this is one of the most democratic opportunities that I've ever seen. It doesn't mean that everyone wanted to be heard. And I'm talking about the people who weren't here and didn't write in, and we've gotten some comments by mail. So, if there's nothing else.
One more
Yes,
question.
yes.
Is it possible for us to get a copy of your final report?
Oh, I think that will be a public, I don't know, I'm going to turn to
See why
the
not.
town
Is
manager.
it like if we give you your, if I give you my email address, it can be emailed to me, or?
Yeah, I would just reach out to my office, the town manager's office, and we'll send it out to whomever.
As far as I'm concerned, it's not a confidential document to,
It's portable, so.
that was part of my, my understanding with the town manager, that it's going to be available to everybody. And it will reflect some of the reports.
Yeah, I imagine, usually when we have a work session, as an example, maybe the best thing to do is wait until we have a work session, because more than likely what I'll do is I'll take Chip's report, and then I put on the policies and procedures that I have, and staff and I have drafted, and I put it as two items in one agenda, item and then submit it to council for their consideration and their input and their thoughts. So it'll be on the website and everything.
Which will be an opportunity for your insight and your thoughts as well.
Are you gonna show council like your revised application and all that,
Oh, yeah.
all that
Sure.
stuff?
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, be careful, no, it's gone. There was an ambulance or police car out front flashing, but it's gone now. So, you know it's gonna get cold,
Yeah.
but it's about time.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.